I was reborn as a low-ranking talented lady living next door to the cold palace, the kind who didn't even have an honorary title. I thought my life was completely ruined until I found 3 ancestral copper coins by my pillow. So, I cast a divination. It was the kun hexagram, with all 6 lines being yin, representing pure kun. Translated into plain English, it meant lie flat and prosper. In my past life, after working overtime for 37 consecutive days, I died suddenly at my desk. My very last thought before dying was, "Please God, let me be reincarnated into a good life." When I woke up, my mouth was full of dirt. It was mixed with withered grass leaves and a musty taste, coating my entire mouth. I lay flat on the ground with my head buzzing, struggling to climb up, hitting my knees on the stone slab. The pain made me gasp. In front of me was a crooked wooden door. Most of the red paint on the frame had peeled off, revealing a dusty gray base. Weeds grew waist high in the courtyard, with broken tiles and rotten wood piled in the corner. The only jujube tree grew crookedly, its bark dry and cracked. A flood of memories that didn't belong to me rushed into my head, as if someone had forcibly shoved a USB drive in, the unformatted kind. The original owner of this body was named Shen Yu, the daughter of a low-ranking official from a family in decline. She entered the palace through the imperial selection and was given the lowest rank of talented lady. On her 3rd day in the palace, while paying respects to the noble consort, she tripped on her own skirt, fell flat on her face, and spilled tea all over the noble consort. On the spot, she was punished to reflect on her mistakes in this dilapidated courtyard next to Yangshang. No deadline was set for her reflection, which meant it was indefinite. The original owner was probably both anxious and terrified, crying until she fainted in the courtyard. And then, I arrived. I held onto the door frame to steady myself and looked down at myself. My sleeves were still stained with mud. Looking at this courtyard, the roof was missing several tiles, and the window paper had 2 large holes, whistling as the wind blew through. I took a deep breath and slowly sorted out the scattered memories. The original owner's father was a minor county magistrate back then. He fell ill and passed away while in office. Selling all the valuables in the house was barely enough to cover the funeral expenses. Her mother took her to seek refuge with distant relatives, enduring years of living under someone else's roof. Later, when the imperial selection came around, the relatives couldn't wait to get rid of this burden. They signed her up overnight and sent her into the palace. Things only got worse after she entered the palace. She had no background, no money, and no backer. She was assigned to the most remote quarters, given the worst food, and had only one maid assigned to her, who was just someone else's leftover. I searched the room. The bedboards were as hard as concrete. The blanket was so thin that light shone through it. On the table was a pot of cold water and a plate of hard, stale buns. Inside the wardrobe, besides 2 changes of clothes, there was only a palm-sized old cloth pouch. I opened the pouch, and 3 copper coins rolled out. The copper coins were polished to a bright patina, their edges worn smooth. One look, and you could tell they were very old items. The corresponding memories floated up in my mind. These were left behind by the original owner's father. They were said to be family heirlooms. Before he passed away, her father would cast a divination for every major event. Supposedly, they were uncannily accurate. Unfortunately, her father passed away too suddenly, only having enough time to teach her the most basic casting method and a few hexagrams. I clenched the 3 copper coins in my palm. The copper was icy cold, yet warming them against my palm brought an inexplicable sense of peace. In my past life, my only hobby was browsing metaphysics forums during overtime breaks. Plum Blossom Divination, 6 Lines Divination, Kimen Dunja. Although I had never studied them formally, I had picked up plenty of bits and pieces over the years. Combined with these 3 copper coins and the method taught by her father, I could barely make do. I closed my eyes, silently chanting, "How can I survive in this imperial harem?" The copper coins left my hand, clattering onto the tabletop, bouncing twice before coming to a stop. I opened my eyes and froze when I saw the hexagram. The kun hexagram, 6 yin lines, pure yin. I searched all the memories and knowledge in my head to piece together the meaning of this hexagram. Great virtue carries all things. Go with the flow. Guard your position in silence. Do not contend or fight. Translated into plain English, it meant 4 words: lie flat, great fortune. I stared at the 3 copper coins on the table, remaining silent for a full 3 seconds. Then, I smiled. I smiled so hard that tears almost came to my eyes. Heavens, you've finally done something decent. In my past life, I spent 27 years in a relentless rat race, competing fiercely from middle school to high school, from high school to graduate school, and from graduate school to the workplace, until I finally worked myself into a coffin. In this life, even the copper coins have spoken, just lie flat. I carefully carefully put the copper coins away, tucking the cloth pouch securely against my body. I swept my gaze over this small, incredibly dilapidated courtyard. It had missing roof tiles and broken windows and was overgrown with weeds. It was so far from the main palace of the harem that it felt like it was in the suburbs. Even the passing eunuchs couldn't be bothered to spare this place a glance. This isn't just next door to the cold palace. This is clearly a paid retirement home. Suddenly, a flurry of light footsteps came from outside the door. Right after, the wooden door was pushed open with great care. A thin, tiny maid poked half of her head in, holding a chipped bowl in her hands. When she saw that I was awake, her eyes instantly went wide.
Mistress, you're awake.
She stepped in timidly. In the bowl was a rice soup so thin that you could see your reflection in it, with only a few lonely grains of rice floating inside. This was Shunhei, the only maid assigned to me. She was 13 years old and as timid as a startled rabbit. I took the bowl and took a sip. It was lukewarm, watery, and had almost no flavor.
Mistress, I've inquired about it. There is no set end to your period of reflection, but if noble consort calms her anger, perhaps you will be assigned to another residence. Should I go beg the head maid to pass along a word?
Shunhei, go close the courtyard gate. Shunhei looked completely bewildered. I finished the last sip of the rice soup and let out a long sigh. From today on, no matter who comes knocking, do not open the door. Just say your mistress is sick, very seriously sick, the kind where she can't get out of bed. Shunhei was completely stunned, her mouth opening into a small, perfect circle. I lay back down on the hard wooden bed and closed my eyes. The wind from outside poured in through the holes, making the window paper rustle loudly. For the first time, I felt a deep sense of peace in my heart. The blessings I never got to enjoy in my past life, I will make up for, in this life, with interest. Whoever wants to strive can go ahead and strive. From this day on, I, Shenyu, am officially slacking off. The copper coins rested quietly in the cloth pouch pressed against my chest. Outside the courtyard, the wind blew through the waist-high weeds, making a rustling sound. Deep within the cold palace lanes, not a single soul was in sight. In this man-eating imperial harem, there were only Chun-Hee and me right now. It was the perfect first day of slacking off. I slept until the sun was high in the sky. The sunlight poked through the holes in the window paper, falling onto the blanket in warm, little patches. I rolled over, and the blanket slipped down, allowing a cold draft to rush down my collar and chill my neck. Chun-Hee was already awake, squatting in the courtyard and poking at an anthill with a twig. Hearing me open the door, she jumped up instantly, wiping her face with the back of her hand.
Mistress, breakfast is still the same kind of rice soup as yesterday.
I will go to the imperial kitchen to fetch it. No rush, I said, leaning against the doorframe. As I looked at the weeds in the yard, Chun-Hee blinked, not knowing what I was looking at. Chun-Hee, is there anything edible in our courtyard? She tilted her head, thought for a moment, and pointed to the crooked jujube tree in the corner. The jujube tree might bear fruit in autumn, but this one looks half dead. My gaze fell upon the base of the wall. Among the weeds, there were a few plants I recognized: purslane, plantain grass, and a small clump of wild green onions. In my past life, working overtime until 2 a.m. and surviving on instant noodles and takeout taught me one thing: when a person is starving, they will put absolutely anything into their mouth. Moreover, these were actually proper edible wild vegetables. Go fetch the porridge from the kitchen and see if you can beg for a tiny pinch of salt while you're at it. Salt. Chun-Hee's face was filled with hesitation. Just say I am sick with a sore throat and need salt water to rinse my mouth. I squatted by the base of the wall, pulling up the purslane and wild green onions one by one. I knocked the dirt off their roots and washed them clean in a basin of water. As isolated as this courtyard was, it had one advantage: no one watched over us. No supervision meant no one looking for trouble, and no one playing dirty tricks. No one would poison my food or throw snakes into my room in the middle of the night. All those schemes to torment people in palace dramas require you to actually have some value worth targeting first. And I, a low-ranking chosen lady who didn't even have a title, had been banished to reflect on my errors in an abandoned courtyard where the weeds grew taller than people. Even the noble consort couldn't be bothered to remember me, which was just perfect. The lower the profile, the safer it is. Shunhei returned quickly. In the bowl was the same watery gruel, but she also brought back a paper packet. Inside was about a fingernail's worth of coarse salt. Nanny-san said, "Considering you are ill, my lady, this is not to be taken as a precedent." She also said that since you are sick, you should behave yourself and not cause any trouble. I took the coarse salt, weighed it in my palm, and smiled. This meant the news of my illness had already spread. Good news. I blanched the purslane in boiling water, mixed it with the salt and some chopped wild green onions, put it in a bowl, and ate it with the watery gruel. I couldn't say it tasted delicious, but it was better than gnawing on dry buns. Standing aside, Shunhei's eyes nearly popped out of her head.
My lady, those are weeds.
Purslane is edible. It clears heat and detoxifies. Trembling, she picked up a piece with her chopsticks and put it in her mouth. Her expression was complex.
It is sour.
Yes, The sourness means it is fresh. After finishing the meal, I walked around the courtyard again. I had a plan in mind. The area by the eastern wall gets plenty of sunlight. I could clear it to plant some vegetables. In the corner of the backyard was a half-collapsed woodpile shed. Once tidied up, it could be used for storage. The water well was at the end of the alley, just a few steps away. Hardly anyone walked around this area, so there was no need to queue for drawing water. As for those holes in the roof, I'd plug them with rags first and repair them once we had gathered enough broken tiles. The food and lodging issues could be barely managed for now. The next step was to bridge the information gap. The Imperial Harem is a closed system. Information gaps determine life and death. If you don't know who has won favor, who has fallen from grace, which path is safe, and which path has pitfalls, you could step on a landmine within 2 steps. I needed a pair of eyes to run errands outside. Shunhei, she stood up straight as a reflex. From now on, whenever you go to the kitchen to fetch meals, keep your ears open. Who had a fight with whom? Who was punished? Who received a reward again? Anything at all. Come back and tell me.
But this servant is clumsy with words. What if I miss your things?
It doesn't matter. Just tell me whatever you hear. I'll judge for myself. He nodded, vigorously. There was an indescribable look in his eyes. It was probably the first time he had been seriously assigned a task, and he felt less like dead weight. In the afternoon, I pulled out the copper coins again, twirling them twice in my palm. This time, I was in no hurry to cast the divination. Instead, I carefully recalled what the original owner's father had taught. 3 copper coins. Characters facing up is yin, back facing up is yang. Toss them 6 times, arranging them from bottom to top into 6 lines, forming a complete hexagram. The original owner's father had only taught the meanings of the 8 basic hexagrams. He hadn't had time to mention changing lines at all. But the forum posts I read in my past life more or less filled in some of the gaps. At least I could match the names of all 64 hexagrams. As for the specific interpretation, 70% relied on knowledge and 30% on intuition. Just as I was pondering this, there were 3 knocks on the courtyard gate from outside. Shunhei startled, subconsciously looking at me. I shook my head at him and mouthed, "Don't make a sound." It went quiet outside for a moment. Immediately after, a low female voice sounded.
Lady Shen, I know you are inside. I am Lady Yu from the neighboring alley. There is a gap in your courtyard wall. All the water I used for watering my vegetables has leaked into your yard.
I thought about it for a moment, then nodded to Shunhei. The door opened to reveal a tall woman standing outside. She looked to be in her early 20s, with sharp features and slightly tan skin. She was clutching a handful of wet weeds in her hand. She swept her gaze over me. Her gaze lingered for less than a second, before looking straight toward the eastern wall. Sure enough, there was a fist-sized gap at the corner of the wall. Water stains were spreading in from there, making a small patch of the ground damp. I dug my vegetable patch on the other side of the wall.
I didn't expect the water underneath to drain toward your side. I'll change the drainage route later so it flows out to the west.
Thanks, I said, keeping it brief. Lady Yu turned to leave. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted the open bowl on the table, and her footsteps paused.
You eat purslane too? It grows in the yard, and it doesn't cost anything. I've planted shepherd's purse and bok choy on my side. They taste better than this. When they grow, I'll share some with you.
With that, she left without looking back. Shunhei quietly leaned over.
My lady, I've heard of this Lady Yu before. She was also banished to the permanent lane. Apparently, she offended some high-ranking consort. The kitchen staff say she has a terrible temper and doesn't get along with anyone.
I watched Lady Yu's retreating figure disappear on the other side of the gap. A bad temper and not getting along with anyone. But she grows vegetables in her yard and even came over on her own to explain the leak. This person has a sense of propriety. I looked down at the copper coins gripped in my hand. My fingertips felt slightly warm. This name. It was as if the copper coins had something to say. I went back into the room, sat at the table, and squeezed the copper coins tightly in my palm, releasing and repeating this twice. The warmth was neither too strong nor too weak. It wasn't as urgent as the last time I cast the kun hexagram. Instead, it felt like a gentle nudge. No rush. Let's wait and see. I put the copper coins back into the cloth pouch and clapped my hands. Outside the door, Shunhei was drawing circles on the ground with a twig. Shunhei, tomorrow when you go to fetch water, take a look at Lady Yu's yard through that gap in the wall. Keep quiet and don't get caught. Just take a quick look. Shunhei tilted her head. Though she didn't quite understand, she still nodded. Late at night, the wind poured in through the broken window, making the oil lamp flicker wildly. I lay in bed, pondering over my first neighbor in the Imperial Harem. The copper copper coin pressed against my chest, neither cold nor hot, perfectly quiet, as if gathering its strength, waiting for the right moment. On my 5th day of slacking off, I cleared the plot of land at the base of the eastern wall. To call it clearing is a bit of an overstatement. The actual operation just involved using the broken shovel Shunhei had dug up from the woodshed to pull out the weeds by their roots. After loosening the soil, I barely managed to prepare a tiny palm-sized patch of flat land. Due to the lumbar disc issues I developed from sitting in an office in my past life, even though I had a young body in this life, it wasn't in much better shape. The original owner of this body was malnourished, with arms as thin as bamboo poles. After tilling the soil for an hour, I got 2 blisters on my palms. I took the plantain weeds and purslane roots I had pulled from all over the yard, replanted them, watered them, and surrounded them with broken roof tiles to block the wind. Shunhei squatted beside me, holding a handful of wild seeds in her hands. She had scraped them from the cracks in the wall on her way to fetch water this morning.
My lady, can we plant these? What seeds are they? I don't know, but I saw the plant in the wall crack had tiny yellow flowers. They should survive.
I took them to have a look. They were tiny black grains. I wasn't sure of the species, but Shunhei had a point. Anything that could survive in the cracks of a wall would not lack vitality. I planted them, leaving their fate to heaven. At noon, Shunhei brought back the porridge, with an expression slightly more subtle than usual. I took the bowl. To my surprise, there were actually a few peanuts in today's porridge. Did Mother-son give you these?
When I went to the imperial kitchen, I heard 2 young eunuchs chatting. They said the emperor visited the noble consort last night, but stayed for less than the time it takes an incense stick to burn before leaving. The noble consort smashed a whole tea set, leaving shards all over the floor.
I slowly stirred the porridge in my bowl.
And then what? And then, the emperor went to Consort Shu's palace and stayed the entire night. This morning, the head maid by the noble consort's side went to the palace affairs office to fetch a new tea set. What grand airs!
Shunhei's voice grew quieter as she spoke, as if she was afraid of being overheard.
Also, about punishing you to reflect on your sins here. It seems the noble consort has already forgotten about it.
When those 2 young eunuchs mentioned the cold palace, they only referred to those unlucky souls. They didn't even say your name. It was wonderful that no one remembered me. Where did the peanuts come from? I did not press any further. In the palace, there are some things better left unasked. In the afternoon, the sound of splashing water came from the gap in the courtyard wall. I walked over to take a look. As expected, Lady Yu had redirected the water flow. The water for her vegetables ran westward along a newly dug shallow ditch. She was squatting in her vegetable patch over there, weeding. Her hair was casually tied up in a bun, and her sleeves were rolled up to her elbows. She worked with even more agility than Shunhei. I tapped the wall twice at the gap. She looked up at me.
The water ditch is adjusted. You can inspect it. I see it.
Good craftsmanship, she snorted, then lowered her head to keep weeding. I was in no hurry to leave, observing her through the fist-sized gap. The courtyard on her side was much tidier than mine. The vegetable patches were neatly divided into 3 beds, with shepherd's purse and bok choy occupying 1 bed each. A basket of chopped firewood was stacked in the corner, perfectly orderly. Her roof had also been repaired, with the broken tiles fitted together seamlessly. This person had been in the cold palace longer than I had, and she was living her life with great diligence. How long have you been here? I asked. Her hand paused for a moment.
7 months.
In a middle of nowhere place like this, she had been alone for 7 months. Who did you offend?
Consort Shu.
She spoke those 2 words with a perfectly flat tone, as if she were just saying the weather was nice today.
On selection day, Consort Shu walked past the front of the line, and I didn't kneel.
Behind me, Shunhei let out a tiny gasp. I, however, found it rather interesting. You didn't want to kneel.
An old injury on my leg. It is easy to kneel down, but hard to stand back up.
She patted the dirt off her hands and stood up, her gaze meeting mine through the gap.
I explained it to her, but she wouldn't listen.
The one who kept the emperor last night, the currently most triumphant peacock in the harem's food chain, and Lady Yu's old injury had been healing for 7 months. It seemed to have recovered by now, or at least she had no trouble squatting to weed and work.
Where did you get that shovel?
A broken piece I dug out of the woodshed.
I have a whole one over here. When you need to use it, just call out over the wall.
Lady Yu turned and went back inside. With a flick of the door curtain, the conversation ended. Shunhei jogged a few steps and leaned close to my ear.
Mistress, is this Lady Yu really someone we can associate with? She is the one who offended Consort Shu.
I went back to my room, pulled the copper coins from under my pillow, and cast a divination. The copper coins rolled twice on the table. One almost fell to the floor, but I slapped my hand down to stop it. With the 6 lines of the hexagram laid out, I cross-referenced them against the half-baked knowledge base in my head. For a good long while, the B hexagram, water over earth, representing closeness, mutual assistance, and alliance. The upper trigram is Kan, water. The lower trigram is Kun, earth, water flowing over the earth, nourishing all things, drawing close to one another. To translate it into plain human speech, she is a good neighbor to keep around. I put the copper coins away, feeling the lingering coolness in my palm. These 3 copper coins are a bit strange. Every time I cast a divination, my palm gets slightly warm, yet the coins themselves remain ice cold. Once they settle, an indescribable intuition spreads from my fingertips into my mind, like a basin of water slowly turning clear. Is this metaphysics, or some kind of talent bound to this body? I can't figure it out for now, but as long as it works, that is enough. In the evening, a bundle of shepherd's purse was passed through the gap. Without a word, it was simply stuffed through the hole in the wall. Holding the bright green shepherd's purse, Shunhei's eyes welled up with tears of gratitude. I washed the shepherd's purse, rubbed it with salt, and mixed a bowl of it. It tasted so much better than purslane. The freshness carried a faint, earthy taste, which even upgraded that bowl of watery porridge. After eating, I lay on the bed and stared at the roof. The moonlight leaked through the cracks in the broken tiles, scattering on the floor in streaks like broken silver. Shunhei slept in the outer room and had already started snoring softly. I took stock of my current assets: 3 copper coins, a half-baked divination skill that barely works, a broken courtyard, a cowardly maid, a hot-tempered but reliable neighbor, the wild vegetable seedlings just planted by the wall, and the most important point of all, no one remembers me. In this dog-eat-dog imperial harem, being forgotten is the greatest shield, but being forgotten also has an expiration date. There is no clear limit on my reflection period, but the head counts in the palace are fixed. The unlucky ones crowded in Yangsheng occupy the lowest positions. If the higher-ups decide to clear out the courtyard on a whim, a knife will be put to my throat. Doing absolutely nothing won't last long. I need to find myself a way to survive. The copper coins lay quietly in the cloth pouch next to my pillow. I closed my eyes, silently asking in my heart which direction my way out lay. I didn't perform a divination, but my fingertips grew inexplicably warm for a moment, as if the copper coins themselves were replying, "Just wait, it is coming soon." I rolled over, pressing the cloth pouch under my pillow. Outside the window, insects chirped incessantly, and the faint sound of the night watchman's clapper echoed from afar. The night in the permanent alley was as quiet as another world, but I knew that this inner palace would never truly be quiet. On my 9th day of lying low, Shunhei brought back more than just porridge from the imperial kitchen. She also brought back a person. To be precise, a young maidservant whose face was covered in tears and snot, whom Shunhei half dragged, half pulled into the courtyard. Holding my bowl, with half a mouthful of porridge still in my mouth, I stared at this scene in a daze for a couple of seconds. She was panting heavily, her forehead covered in sweat.
Mistress, this is Xiao He from the kitchen.
Xiao He looked to be around 14 or 15, so thin that her cheekbones protruded, and her eyes were as swollen as peaches. As soon as she saw me, she fell to her knees with a thud, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe.
"Please, mistress, save my life."
I set down my bowl beside her. Shunhei was so anxious, she kept wringing her hands, whispering rapidly to explain.
Xiao He works in the imperial kitchen. The day before yesterday, she accidentally broke a plate. That plate was meant for Consort D's meal. The manager said she must be punished with 20 lashes, and then sent to the laundry service after the beating. She was terrified and was crying by the well this morning, which is when I happened to run into her.
"And so you brought her back?" Shunhei shrank her neck, her voice as quiet as a mosquito.
I felt sorry for her, and she said she had heard that there is a mistress who can perform divinations and figure out ways to avoid disaster. So
So you thought of my 3 copper coins. I glanced at Shunhei. This girl might be timid, but at critical moments, she is actually smarter than I thought. She didn't directly expose that I could tell fortunes, but instead brought the person back first, leaving the decision to me. Xiao He knelt on the ground, trembling all over, her lips completely pale.
"Mistress, I will give you anything. I'll give you all of my 3 months' worth of savings. I beg you to read my fortune and see if I can escape this disaster."
3 months' worth of savings. The monthly allowance of the lowest-ranking maid adds up to only a few dozen copper coins at most. For her to save for 3 months, it was probably only enough to buy 2 sesame cakes outside the palace. But to her, this was already everything. I'll close the door and have Shunhei keep watch outside. Get up, don't kneel. The floor is cold. Xiao He stood up shiveringly, wiped her face with her sleeve, and looked at me eagerly. I fished out the cloth bundle from beside my pillow and took out 3 copper coins. "Tell me exactly what happened from start to finish. Don't cry. Explain it clearly."
The dish Consort D wanted was a 5-piece set of celadon ware, newly delivered by the Imperial Household Department. Xiao He slipped while carrying the tray and shattered one of them. The head maid was furious, and the punishment has already been decided. The execution would take place tomorrow afternoon.
Can someone take your place?
You cannot. The head maid saw with her own eyes that I broke it.
Can the dish be paid for?
That is tribute porcelain, registered in the Imperial Household Department's inventory. Once it is broken, it is broken. I can't afford to pay for it.
Taking it head-on won't work, and begging for mercy is useless. The head maid is dead set on making an example of him. Then let's change our approach. I closed my eyes. The copper coins grew slightly warm in my palm. I silently chanted, Shao He. Where is the breakthrough to escape this calamity? The copper coin slipped from my hand, clinking 6 times. I opened my eyes to identify the hexagrams one by one. It was the Hmong hexagram, mountain over water. Hmong represents youth, ignorance, and obscurity. The upper trigram is Gen, mountain. The lower trigram is Kan, water. There is water below the mountain. The flow of water is blocked by the mountain, shrouded in dense mist. But the key line of the Hmong hexagram lies in the 9 in the second place. It is not I who seek the youth, but the youth who seeks me. Translated, it means you coming to find me is the right direction. The changing line falls on the 6 in the third place. The resulting nuclear hexagram contains Gen, which represents movement, shock, and thunder. I stared at the arrangement of the copper coins on the table, my mind rapidly sorting through information. Shao He, on the day you broke the plate, besides you in the kitchen, who else was present?
There was Granny's son, 2 sisters who prepped the vegetables, and a newly arrived young eunuch named Fu Shun.
Before you slipped, was the floor dry or wet? Shao He's eyes widened, and her mouth fell open.
It was wet. I remember there was a puddle of water on the floor. At the time, I even found it strange. The kitchen floor had just been swept, so why was there water?
Who spilled that water? Shao He's face turned pale instantly.
Fu Shin, the newly arrived young eunuch. He had been washing a rag at that exact spot earlier. Did he do it on purpose?
I didn't answer directly. The hexagram indicated that there was a hidden truth behind the ignorance. As for whether Fu Shun did it intentionally or accidentally, she needed to verify that herself, but I could point her in a direction. Tomorrow afternoon, before the punishment is carried out, go to the head maid, explain clearly about that puddle of water on the ground. Do not complain, and do not say who harmed you. Just say, this servant recalls that the floor was wet at the time, and I only slipped because I stepped on it. I deserve to die for not watching my step. But regarding this matter, this servant wishes to report the truth. Shao He blinked, looking completely bewildered.
But will saying it this way really work?
How many years has the head maid managed the kitchen?
Over 10 years.
For someone who has been a shrewd operator there for over 10 years, do you really think she won't be able to find out how that puddle of water got there? Shao He's lips trembled. Suddenly, he fell to his knees with a thud and kowtowed to me. His forehead hit the ground with a sharp knock, producing a dull thud.
Thank you, young mistress.
All right, get up. I gave him a hand to help him up. Don't knock yourself silly. You still have to go and speak tomorrow. With red-rimmed eyes, he stood up, pulled a small bundle, wrapped in a cloth from his sleeve, and presented it with both hands. Those dozens of copper coins were stacked neatly inside. I took a glance at them and pushed them back. Keep the money. In the future, if the kitchen has any leftover vegetable leaves or radish ends, the kind that others don't want, just bring a portion for Chun He. Shao He stared at me blankly, about to kneel again. I quickly stopped him. Go on, don't stay here too long. It wouldn't look good if anyone saw. Chun He escorted Shao He out of the alley. When she returned, she was absolutely beaming with excitement.
Young mistress, you are truly amazing. That divination, sheesh.
I raised a single finger. This matter is strictly between you and me. You must not spread the word. Chun He nodded vigorously and made a firm gesture of sealing her lips. I sat at the table, wiping the copper coins clean one by one before putting them back into the cloth pouch. In truth, that divination just now hadn't directly told me that Fu Shun had spilled the water. The information provided by the hexagram was very vague. It was based on the direction pointed out by the Hmong hexagram, combined with logical deduction that I had guessed it. The ground was wet. Someone had washed a rag there before. The plate just happened to break in that exact spot. Was it a coincidence or intentional? Once the head maid investigated, the truth would easily come to light. All Shao He had to do was lay the facts back out on the table and let the person in charge judge for themselves. The copper coins give the direction, and the brain makes the judgment. This is the correct way to use this half-baked divination skill. But what caught my attention was another piece of information. Shao He works in the imperial kitchen. He handles the meals for every palace in the inner court daily. Which consort ordered an extra dish? Which mistress cut back on her meals? What was recorded and what was noted? Whose dish was missing and whose soup was sent back? This was 10 times more accurate than Chun He keeping her ears open at the kitchen door. On the surface, I lost some money funny, but in reality, what I gained was an information pipeline planted right in the imperial kitchen. The sky began to darken. From across the neighboring wall came the sound of Lady Yu chopping firewood. The rhythm was steady, strike after strike. Leaning against the doorframe, I counted the days on my fingers. My current assets have expanded from 3 copper coins to a small vegetable patch, a maid, a neighbor, and a kitchen connection soon to be in hand. My grand plan of slacking off is progressing steadily. News about Xiao he came on the 3rd day. When Chun he returned with the porridge, she was walking twice as fast as usual. Nearly half of the porridge had sloshed out of the bowl, spilling all along the way. She was completely oblivious to it. Pushing the door open, she shouted to me.
Mistress Xiao, he didn't get flogged.
I was squatting by the vegetable patch watering the wild seedlings and only raised my eyelids slightly upon hearing this. Chun, he squatted down beside me.
Xiao he did as you said and went to the headmaid. He told her about the puddle on the floor. The headmaid didn't say anything at the time. The next day, she called everyone who was on duty that day in the kitchen for questioning. When Fu Shun was questioned about washing the rag, stammered and couldn't give a straight answer. The headmaid's face darkened on the spot.
What happened next?
The beating wasn't waived, but it was reduced from 20 strokes to 5. It was just a token punishment. Fu Shun has been transferred. I heard he was sent to the woodshed to chop wood. Xiao he is still in the imperial kitchen. The headmaid didn't make things difficult for him again.
5 strokes is acceptable. The headmaid is, after all, the person in charge. The plate did indeed break in Xiao He's hands. It wouldn't be right not to punish him, but since she uncovered the cause of the slippery floor, a heavy punishment was reduced to a light rap on the knuckles. Both appearances and fairness were preserved.
And another thing.
Chun, he pulled a greaseproof paper package from her sleeve and carefully unfolded it. Inside were 4 fresh green scallions, 2 thumb-sized pieces of ginger, and a small pinch of dried Sichuan peppercorn.
Xiao he slipped these to me. She said they were leftover scraps from the imperial kitchen's prep work and that nobody wanted them.
I picked up a peppercorn and brought it to my nose to sniff. The numbing aroma hit my brain instantly. Good stuff. With these, the purslane and shepherd's purse would no longer be just grass boiled in plain water. Chun, he wasn't finished yet. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a whisper.
Xiao he also told me 2 things. First, Consort D has had a poor appetite lately. She barely touched her food for 3 days in a row. The imperial physicians went to see her twice, and the prescriptions they wrote included herbs to calm her nerves. Second, Consort Shu has bestowed dishes on those serving the emperor several times over the past few days, and she has been exceptionally generous.
I slowly stirred the porridge in my bowl. Consort D has a poor appetite and is taking nerve-calming medicine. Either she is physically unwell or she has something on her mind. Consort Shu is generously bestowing dishes on those serving the emperor, winning over the eyes and ears around the sovereign. Looking at these 2 things together makes them rather interesting. The emperor has clearly been visiting Consort Shu more often lately, leaving Consort D neglected. The nerve-calming medicine is highly likely for a heartache. Meanwhile, Consort Shu is seizing the opportunity to consolidate her advantage and curry favor with those around the emperor. This rivalry in the imperial harem follows the exact same logic as fighting for a project in the corporate world. Resources always tilt toward the winners. From now on, whatever news Xiao he gives you, relate it to me word for word. Xunhei gave a firm nod of agreement. In the afternoon, I picked a handful of newly grown purslane buds, tossed them with Sichuan peppercorns and salt, and passed them over to Talent Yu through the hole in the wall. She took it and had a taste. After chewing a couple of times, her eyebrows shot up.
Where did you get Sichuan peppercorns?
A friend in the imperial kitchen gave them to me. You even have friends in the imperial kitchen? The way she looked at me shifted slightly, carrying a hint of reassessment. I smiled and didn't explain. Talent Yu set the bowl of greens on the windowsill. After a brief silence, she suddenly spoke. Lately things haven't been peaceful here in Yongxiang. I leaned against the wall, waiting for her to continue.
In the courtyard at the end of the alley, there lives a talent surnamed Zhou. She has been here for nearly a year. A few days ago, a managing palace maid suddenly came to see her, saying they needed to re-register the roster of personnel in Yongxiang. Every autumn, the palace imperial household department audits the staff count of the inner palace, those who are redundant or useless, as well as those who committed offenses and haven't been fully dealt with, will be dismissed and removed. In previous years, it was just a formality, but this year it has been moved up by 2 months.
For some reason, my heart skipped a beat. I had thought about this issue before. The people in Yongxiang hold the lowest ranking positions on the official roster. If the higher-ups want to cut personnel, the first blow will fall on us. And after the audit, where do the dismissed people go?
The lucky ones are sent back to their hometowns. The unlucky ones are sent to guard the imperial mausoleums. As for the worst case, to be buried alive as a sacrifice for some deceased noble.
Behind me, Shunhei gasped in horror, her face turning deathly pale. My face remained expressionless, but my mind was already racing with calculations. The roster check had been moved up by 2 months for reasons unknown, but one thing was certain: the shelf life of my being forgotten was shorter than I had anticipated. Simply lying low and doing nothing was no longer an option. That night, I took out my copper coins. This time, the question I asked was very specific. Regarding this roster check, would it bring me good fortune or disaster? In the palm of my hand, the copper coins grew burning hot. I cast them 6 times. Each time they fell, they spun several times before coming to a stop. It was the hexagram of Tongren Fellowship with men under heaven fire. Tongren means walking together with others. The upper trigram is Qian heaven, and the lower trigram is Li fire. Firelight illuminates the dome of heaven. Like-minded people gather in the wilderness. This is a hexagram about forming alliances. The key line lies in the second yin, fellowship with men in the clan, humiliation. It means that if one only bands together within a small circle, the vision is too narrow, and there will be regrets. There must first be painful struggles before there can be laughter later. A tough battle must be fought in the process. To put it in plain English, do not shrink into a corner to fight alone. I put away the copper coins and walked out into the courtyard. The moon had risen, clear and cold, hanging on the branches of the crooked jujube tree. In the neighboring courtyard of Lady Yu, the lights were already out. From deep within the alley, the occasional sound of the watchman's clapper drifted over. My current circle consisted of Shunhei, Lady Yu, and Xiao He, a timid but loyal maid, a short-tempered but reliable neighbor, and a low-ranking young girl in the imperial kitchen. They were all at the very bottom of the palace food chain, but being at the bottom of the food chain had one advantage. These people shuttled through every corner of the palace daily, handling countless trivial details. No one cared about what they heard or what they saw. Yet, when these fragments are pieced together, they form an intelligence network covering the entire inner palace. Information itself is cheap, but at the right time, delivering the right information to the right person, it can be a lifesaver. The problem is, even if you spread this network, I'm just a low-ranking consort in reflection who rarely even steps out of her courtyard. I can't exactly go around handing out flyers all over the harem. I don't know when Shunhei woke up, but she stood at the door wrapped in a thin quilt, rubbing her eyes as she looked at me.
What are you doing standing in the courtyard, my lady? It is chilly tonight.
Shunhei, when you go to the imperial kitchen tomorrow, pass a message to Xiao He. Tell him that if anyone around him falls on hard times and doesn't know what to do, they can come and talk to me. I won't charge them any money. Just bringing some vegetable leaves will do. Shunhei blinked her eyes and nodded, only half understanding. I went back to my room, lay down, pulling the quilt up to my chin. I held the copper coins close to my chest. They felt warm and comforting. The Tongren hexagram says, first wailing, then laughing, then let the wind and waves come. Anyway, I'm already at the very bottom. How much deeper can I sink? Outside the window, moonlight leaked through the cracks in the broken tiles, drawing silver white lines on the floor. I closed my eyes and went over all the information I had gathered today in my head. Consort Shu is making her move. The roster is being checked. The people in the Yang lane are like fish on a chopping board, but even fish on a chopping board might still have a chance to flip over. The copper coins said to expand my circle, so I'll start tomorrow. And so, my business at the very bottom of the harem was officially open for trade. Xiao He's mouth was even more useful than I had anticipated. Within 3 days, my dilapidated courtyard welcomed 4 groups of visitors. The first was a young girl who washed dishes in the kitchen. Her name was Asing, and she was 12 years old.
I knocked over a water bucket, and as punishment, half a month of my salary was docked. If it has been docked, is there any way I can get it back?
I cast a hexagram and got the hexagram of modesty, Dishan Qian. With modesty and yielding, one gains by not contending. Don't go to the supervisor to beg for mercy. Work more and talk less. In half a month, things will naturally take a turn for the better. When she left behind a handful of withered celery leaves. The second was an old eunuch who watered plants in the greenhouse, surnamed Liu, in his 50s.
My knees hurt so much that I can barely walk. I want to divine how much longer I can work in the greenhouse, and whether I'll be thrown to some even harsher place.
The feng shui hexagram of dispersion, feng shui huan. Dispersion means scattering of hardships, but when the 5th 9 line changes, shouting out loud can actually rally people's hearts. Report your knee trouble truthfully to the greenhouse supervisor. Don't hide it. the supervisor is short-staffed. Rather than bringing in an inexperienced hand at the last minute, it is better to reassign you to a lighter task. He left behind half a bundle of dried osmanthus flowers, swept from under the trees last autumn, which could be brewed in boiling water to drink. The third was a rough service matron from the laundry department, who wanted me to divine whether her son outside the palace would pass the autumn provincial examinations this year. I could only give a general direction, saying that the Wencheng star would boost his exam, telling her to wait for the news with peace of mind. She left 2 pieces of honey locust pods used for washing clothes. The fourth one was interesting. The one who came was a young eunuch. He was tall and thin, with clever eyes. Upon entering, he first scanned the courtyard, and only spoke after confirming there were no outsiders.
This servant is named Chang'an, serving in the imperial tea room.
My hands didn't stop peeling Sichuan peppercorns, and my tone remained steady. What is it? Chang'an squatted down, keeping his voice extremely low.
This servant wants to divine who among those serving His Majesty will meet with misfortune soon.
Shunhei, who was pouring water nearby, had her hand tremble slightly. The spout of the teapot clinked against the rim of the bowl, making a sharp, clinking sound. I glanced at Chang'an. This man didn't come to divine his own fate. He came to test the wind. Why do you think someone will meet with misfortune? Chang'an licked his lips, hesitated for a few moments, gritted his teeth and said,
There are 6 of us in the tea room in total. The night before last, the emperor was working very late. I was on the night shift to serve tea. When I came out after serving, I ran into another colleague on the night shift named Jinbao. He was acting suspiciously outside the side hall, clutching a slip of paper and stuffing it into his sleeve.
Did you see what was written on the slip of paper? No, but after Jinbao saw me, his face turned pale. The next day, he was exceptionally warm and friendly to me, and even treated me to a plate of pastries. Guilty conscience, plus hush money, and testing the waters. This was no longer a simple matter of flattery or gossip. A slip of paper, the side hall, and late at night, the implications here could be massive. I put down the Sichuan peppercorns in my hand and patted the crumbs off my hands. I have a rule for my fortune telling. I only divine the affairs of the querent themselves, not the fortune or misfortune of a third party. You want to know who will meet with disaster. I cannot help you with that. A flash of disappointment crossed Chang'an's face. But if you want to ask what you should do, I can do that. His eyes lit up for an instant, and he nodded immediately. I took out the copper coins, closed my eyes, and silently chanted, Chang'an. Between advancing and retreating at this moment, what is his best course of action? The copper coins fell, their clinking exceptionally crisp in the quiet courtyard. Thunder over mountain, the hexagram of Xiaoguo slight excess. Small matters may be undertaken, but great matters must not be undertaken. The upper trigram is Zhen, thunder, and the lower trigram is Zhen, mountain. Thunder rumbles on the mountain. Though the momentum is loud, it ultimately cannot cross the mountain peak. The 5th line changes. Dense clouds, but no rain. Coming from my western outskirts, the clouds hang low and heavy, yet the rain hesitates to fall. I stared at the hexagram and pondered for a long time. Chang'an, you're coming to find me today. Shows that you are already panicking in your heart. You're afraid that what Jinbao did will implicate you, yet you don't dare to make a fuss, so you wanted to find someone to help you judge if you are safe. His Adam's apple bobbed. My advice is that you saw nothing. Let the matter of the note rot in your stomach. If Jinbao offers you pastries, just accept them with a smile, as if he is just being nice. From now on, go on duty as you should, and serve tea as you should. Don't spare an extra glance, and don't ask a single extra question. Chang'an knit his brows, his face filled with reluctance.
But what if Jinbao really is passing messages? Once the matter comes to light and they investigate, everyone in the tea room will be interrogated. When the time comes, if I say I didn't know, who would believe me?
If you go report him now, even fewer people will believe you. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. What was written on the note? Who was it passed to? Who is standing behind him? You don't know any of this. Getting mixed up in this now. The best outcome is being a witness and repeatedly cross-examined. The worst outcome is being silenced forever. Chang'an's face turned a shade paler. The divination made it very clear. Small matters can be pursued. Great matters must not be attempted. Managing your own tea station well is your greatest self-preservation. Wait for this matter to expose itself. Rest assured, things like notes cannot be hidden for long. When that time comes, you will be clean and completely untouched by it, which is actually the safest place to be. Chang'an fell silent for a long while. Finally, he let out a long breath.
I understand.
He pulled a paper parcel from his robe, not large but heavy. I opened it to take a look. It was a small piece of tea brick. I cannot offer you anything valuable. This piece is broken. It was meant to be thrown away, but I kept it. This is too valuable. I pushed the paper package back. The rules say you only need to bring some cabbage leaves.
I don't have any cabbage leaves.
He scratched his head and stuffed the tea brick back onto my table.
But this broken tea was truly meant to be discarded. It won't violate any rules for you to accept it.
After Chang'an left, Shunhei held the piece of tea brick, looking it over and over. Her eyes were shining as if she had discovered a treasure.
My lady, this tea smells so fragrant.
I ignored the tea. Sitting at the table, I slowly drew in the dust on the tabletop with a twig. Jinbao, Imperial Tea Room, late night. Side hall. The note Consort Shu has recently been frequently rewarding the imperial attendants with dishes. If Jinbao is an informant planted by Consort Shu beside the emperor, then the note is highly likely passing information about the emperor's movements. Which palace is he visiting tonight? Whom did he meet? What did he say? The core resource for competing for favor in the harem has always been only one thing: the emperor's attention. Whoever can know the emperor's whereabouts and thoughts in advance can seize the upper hand. Consort Shu is currently riding high on success. She has the motive, and she also has the capability to do this. But what does this have to do with me? I wiped away the writing on the table with my hand, leaned against the back of the chair, and closed my eyes. The coins showed the hexagram of Xiaoguo. Small matters can be pursued. Great matters must not be pursued. This was spoken to Chang'an. But was it not also a reminder to myself? I am merely a disgraced lady reflecting on my sins in the lane of eternity. I do not even count as a frog by the pond. The smartest thing to do right now, just as I told Chang'an, I knew nothing, and to have heard nothing, but this piece of information itself is valuable, not for use right now, but at some appropriate moment in the future, it might become a crucial chess piece. I etched this matter, along with the date, figures, and details, stroke by stroke into my mind. In the evening, Lady-in-Waiting Yu's voice came from next door. Shen Yu. I walked over to the hole in the wall. She was standing on the other side, holding 2 freshly pulled baby bok choys in her hand, with a rather grim expression on her face. Today, a managing palace maid came to register my profile. My heart sank. What did she ask?
Name, age, when I entered the palace, what offense I committed, and whether I have any relatives.
She handed the bok choy over, her voice stiff.
Finally, she asked if I was in good health and if I had any illnesses. If you are in good health.
Asking this question against the backdrop of a staff reduction inventory was highly significant. Those who can work will stay, and those who can't will be disposed of. How did you answer?
The truth that I have an old leg injury, but it is no longer a major issue.
I took the bok choy, remaining silent for a few seconds. Next time, if anyone comes to ask again, tell them your old injury hasn't healed, that it flares up on cloudy and rainy days, and that you can barely even walk. Lady-in-Waiting Yu's brow furrowed sharply.
You want me to pretend to be sick?
It is not pretending to be sick. It is leaving yourself some leeway. I looked into her eyes. For someone in good health, the higher-ups can arrange to send them anywhere. To the imperial tombs, the frontier, or even as a sacrificial burial, but someone who is injured or ill is a hassle to handle, so they will most likely put them on hold for later discussion. Lady-in-Waiting Yu fell silent for a long time. The wind from the alley blew through the hole in the wall, fluttering the stray hairs at her temples, strand by strand. Put on hold for later discussion. And then what? Then there will be time to think of other ways. He stared at me for several seconds. His sharp gaze was like peeling back the layers of an onion. Finally, he grunted, turned around, and left. After taking 2 steps, he paused again. Without turning his head, he threw a comment back. You are more complex than you look. I stood by the hole in the wall and smiled slightly. It was just that having spent 5 years at an internet company in my past life, I had learned one thing. Before the layoff list comes out, you must always make sure that you are the one who is too troublesome to deal with. Returning to the room, I sat at the table, took out the copper coins, and asked this divination with great caution, focusing on the roster. Where is the variable in this matter? The copper coins slipped from my hand, bouncing twice on the stone floor. It was the GE hexagram revolution. Revolution means change and discarding the old for the new. The upper trigram is Dewey Lake. The lower trigram is Li, fire. Fire in the lake. Water and fire clash. The old order is about to be broken. The 5th line changes. The great man changes like a tiger. Taking action brings good fortune. A great figure will take the initiative to make a change. There is no need for you to beg him. He will move on his own. I stared at the hexagram, my heart skipping 2 beats. The great man changes like a tiger. In this inner palace, there is only one person who can be called the great man, the the Emperor. The variable is not in the Imperial Household Department, nor with Consort Shu, but with the Emperor himself. I briefly explained the conclusion of the hexagram through the hole in the wall. Lady-in-waiting Yu fell silent for a moment, some of the energy draining from her voice.
Are your copper coins really that accurate?
70% depends on the hexagram, 30% on brains.
What does that 30% of brains tell you?
It tells me that Consort Shu is acting too greedily and hastily. How long has she been favored, and she is already moving to replace the staff serving directly before the Emperor, bribing the chief director of the palace wardrobe, and auditing the rosters ahead of schedule. Every step was done with major fanfare. How long can this kind of behavior be hidden right under the Emperor's nose? It went quiet on the other side of the wall again. After quite a long while, talented Lady Yu's voice drifted out from the darkness.
Shen Yu, what on earth did you do in your past life?
I smiled. I was a corporate laborer. That night, I barely got any sleep, lying on the hard, stiff wooden bedboards, listening to the chirping of insects outside the window and the faint, distant sound of the night watch drums. I arranged and rearranged all the pieces of information I currently had, over and over in my head. Consort Shu is racing against time. She knows her window of favor is limited, so she is desperately stuffing people into every possible position and purging her opponents. I am all too familiar with this style of play. That is exactly what the parachute directors in my company did in my past life. But the reasons why parachute directors fell from power were always the same. They overreached and tripped themselves up. On the day the storm finally arrived, the weather was extraordinarily good. The sky was clear for thousands of miles, without a single cloud in sight. Chun-He's hands were shaking when she brought the porridge into the room. It wasn't the kind of shaking from fear, but rather from being overly excited, the kind that simply couldn't be suppressed.
My lady, something huge has happened. She set the bowl down on the table with a thud, spilling a circle of porridge. Jin Bao from the Imperial Tea Room was dragged out of the duty room by the guards last night.
My hand stirring the porridge paused for a brief moment. Who dragged him? The Imperial Guards.
4 of them escorted him directly to the Palace Discipline Department. The tea room was sealed off overnight, and everyone inside was isolated for interrogation. Not a single person is allowed to come out.
Chang'an, that was the first name that flashed through my mind. Everyone in the tea room was detained?
They were all detained, but there was one who wasn't taken away. It is Chang'an. He just happened to have yesterday off. Since he was off duty, he wasn't in the tea room when the guards arrived. He was called in separately for questioning this morning and was released by noon.
I let out a long, deep sigh of relief. The day Chang'an had his day off happened to be the very night Jin Bao got into trouble. He wasn't present, so he wasn't swept up with the rest of them. And because he had listened to me earlier, he hadn't gotten involved in anything at all. When questioned, he was completely clean. The Xiaoguo hexagram. Small matters may succeed, but major undertakings will fail. This hexagram saved his life. What else? Xunhei swallowed hard and leaned in even closer.
3 slips of paper were found on Jinbao. The contents haven't leaked out, but he heard the kitchen supervisor whispering in private
that a storm seems to be brewing in Consort Shu's palace. A great personage changes like a tiger. The copper coins had predicted it without the slightest error. I didn't rush to celebrate. Instead, I pushed the porridge bowl aside and began to deduce the subsequent chain reaction in my mind and began to mentally calculate the chain reaction that would follow. The original owner of this body had been banished to the permanent alley precisely because she had spilled tea on the noble consort. The noble consort was a vengeful person. A minor incident over a cup of tea was something she would remember for a lifetime. Sure enough, when the official register was approved, Xunhei came running back to deliver the news. She had run so fast, she lost her shoes, leaving a bloody footprint from the sole of one foot.
You've been assigned to guard the Imperial Mausoleum. To enter it alive and be buried beside it when you die is no different from being a prisoner. But Lady Yu's name was crossed off. The annotation reads, "Old injuries not yet healed. Punishment temporarily deferred."
The trick of feigning illness had worked. I did not, but I was not. Just when I thought everything was set in stone, the courtyard gate was pushed open. A woman stood at the entrance. She was in her early 40s with a slender build, wearing an inconspicuous grayish-blue tunic, with her hair styled meticulously. Lady Shen, my surname is Liu. I am from Consort D's palace. She was Consort D's most trusted head palace maid, Auntie Liu. At this moment, all by herself, she walked into this dilapidated courtyard at the deepest end of the Yang Lane.
I heard there is a talented lady in the Yang Lane who can cast divinations and is quite accurate at predicting things. Her Highness is undecided on a matter and would like to ask you to cast a divination.
What is it?
Her Highness wishes to know if that roster before the Emperor will personally look over that roster presented to him.
What Consort D was asking happened to be the very sword hanging over my head. Consort D was betting that the Emperor would personally open the roster and discover that the noble consort had used the imperial household department to smuggle in her own agenda. And I, Shen Yu, was the old copper to be remelted in that cauldron? I took out my copper coins, closed my eyes, and shook them for the divination. With a clinking sound, the 6 lines of the hexagram were cast. It was hexagram Daiyu, great possession, fire over heaven. The Daiyu hexagram indicates a great harvest. The sun hangs high in the sky, its light shining everywhere, bringing abundance to all things. The emperor will, but only if someone reminds him to look. With fire hanging in the heavens, nothing can remain hidden. Auntie Liu left behind a gold leaf and a slip of paper. On the paper were 4 words: quietly await good news. I did not sleep that night. After the night watchman's clapper sounded for the 5th watch, the sound of orderly footsteps came from the entrance of the lane. The imperial decree team stopped in front of my courtyard gate.
Shen Yu, the talented lady of Yang Lane, accept the decree. Having completed your reflection, you are to move to the side palace of the West Court to assume the post of the female diviner officer and take charge of praying for blessings in the palace. Thus decree received.
I received the imperial decree with both hands and kowtowed in a proper, orderly manner. Thank you, your majesty, for your grace. On the day I left the Yang Lane, the talented Lady Yu passed a small cabbage to me through the hole in the wall. I took the cabbage. There was still dew on its leaves. There were no hugs, nor any sentimental goodbyes. In the side palace of the West Court, Shunhei touched the bedding. My sister burst into tears on the spot.
It is so soft, my lady.
The quilt is so soft. I spread the copper coins on the table. They were no longer hot. From the very first day I arrived in this world, the copper coins had never lied to me. The Kun hexagram said to lie low. The B hexagram said to form alliances. The Tongren hexagram said to expand my circle. The Xiaoguo hexagram saved Chang'an. The GE hexagram foretold consort Shu's downfall. The Ding hexagram said I would be given an important post. I pushed open the window. The early morning breeze filled the entire room. In my past life, I worked myself to death. In this life, I'll take it easy to survive. As for the future, I'll cast the coins for the future when the time comes.